Transparency, in my opinion, is one of the pillars to success in real estate. To hear our thoughts and more, stay tuned to this episode of The Den.
The Den, powered by the Lyons Group, a show dedicated to exploring hot topics in real estate, local happenings, and industry trends. We're a small team of professionals approaching $400 million in sales and nearly 2,000 local transactions. You're listening to time-tested experts and industry leaders. Here's a refreshing look at real estate happenings and more. Welcome to The Den.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Den. Today, we're going to be talking about transparency in real estate, when to use it, maybe when not to use it, some pros and cons. But before I get to that, let me introduce my friends, my partners, my co-hosts, the fellow members of the Lyons Group. To my left, Paul, hand me the rockberry, Aspen, the Ninja Groen, and the boss, Shannon Martin Martinez. My name is Ben Glass Joe Lyons. You remember, what was that?
That is the best analogy of you I've ever heard.
Hey, you remember Mike Tyson Punch Out?
Of course.
Yeah, first guy
first guy.
Glass Joe, transparent.
One hit.
Yeah, one hit wonder. That's me. If I was a singer, I'd be a one hit wonder. You know that? I mean, I don't know if I could do that. The whole album thing. I just get one and go. But I digress. Let's get into transparency. This is an important topic because I feel like, and I haven't talked to my partners here about this topic, but I feel like transparency is one of the most vital things you can use in a real estate transaction to really advance your position. Believe it or not. And some people would argue, hey, transparency may weaken. It's like showing your cards, right? May weaken your position. But I have a different thought about that. But I want to hear your thoughts on transparency and how it can help or hurt you in a real estate transaction. And Shannon, I'm going to start with you.
Why are you doing that?
You don't look at them. It's not
right,
those
I know.
two, they had their
Quit
heads
making
down.
Eye contact.
Yeah, no. We talk a lot about this over the years. You and I have worked together for 20 plus years. And one of the things that like a recurring theme is the frustration behind people not being forthright with their position. Now, that can come from a client's perspective, but it can also come between realtors. So if you're talking to another realtor and you're transparent about an issue and they're not, it can muddy the waters. So why don't you share with me your thoughts on how important it is to be transparent, first and foremost, if you're a client, to your realtor about your position and your thoughts. And then second of all, we'll get into the between realtors, between parties.
So I would say transparency with your realtor is extremely important. It would be hard for me to assist you the best of my ability if I don't have all the information. So I'm not going to treat you differently if you're in a divorce, but I might be able to safeguard a few things. I'm not going to, treat you differently if maybe you're having to borrow your down payment and you don't have it. There's no reason to hide those things. The more that I know, I think that when we're all making decisions based on the current accurate information, then we're making better decisions. So I think transparency when you're talking about realtor to customer is vital. I say, give me everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, and let's work through it together and get you in the best possible position that we can. But sometimes if you're working against me, I won't be able to do that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are fearful of being totally transparent, right? Because they may feel like, that they don't want. It's kind of like when you go to your dentist and your dentist says, so you're brushing and flossing. You're like, oh yeah, twice a day. Really?
Are you not?
Yeah. Are you really? Yeah. Am I not?
Yeah, I can see in there.
I can see exactly. But some people have fear of that. They're concerned about judgment or that, they just don't want to be embarrassed or whatever it is. But you're saying, put it on the table, especially with your realtor, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And not necessarily to the rest of the world, but have a frank conversation.
Well, we're not here to judge somebody. I'm here to meet your goals. And if your goal is to buy or sell a house, then I need to know, as much information as I can. I want to know where you're at with everything so I can help you better make decisions and I can make better decisions on your behalf. Not that we make a lot of decisions on people's behalf, but just like how we're going to market or how we're going to present something or what places we're going to look at. There's all these decisions we make, a million little decisions we make throughout the day. And if I know everything about you, then I can better serve you.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, Aspen, do you concur with that? Is that your thought as well?
Yeah, it is. And Paul and I were actually just talking about this yesterday. We were about like how we shouldn't assume what's the best for our clients. Or if you see something, you're like, wow, this house is like perfect for me. It doesn't mean it's perfect for them. They might have a completely different thing that they're wanting or needing or what they feel comfortable in. So not putting our own judgment and bias on those things and really just seeing what our clients want and making sure we're doing everything in their best interest, because most people actually, they know what they want, they know what they like, and they know what's best for them. We don't need to make those decisions for them.
Does your spider sense ever kick off and go, oh, they're not really telling me the full story? And if so, like, do you press them on it?
It doesn't happen too often, but sometimes I've noticed with like first time home buyers, I think they think if they tell us stuff, then we might share it with other people or judge them, or it's going to hurt their position. But actually, the more upfront and honest you are with your realtor and your lender, especially on the buy side and the sell side, I think that you're just going to be in a better position, because it's probably not the first time that we've seen it. You might think you're different. We've probably seen it a handful of times, if not more. So because a lot of transactions are very, very similar, and we might have some different options or different ideas that you might not know about. And on the sell side, disclose. The more that I hear, if I open up a adverse materials or a property disclosure page and it's like filled out, I just already feel better versus if there's just a line through it. I'm like, well, now I really feel like I need to dig.
Yeah.
What are we hiding here? And then not always, but that's just how I feel. So the more disclosure, I think, almost always puts you in a better spot.
So if you're working with a seller and they decide not to fill out, or they line through a property disclosure, are you asking follow-up questions? Are you kind of probing a bit? Are you, pushing a little bit more?
I work a lot with investors, and you're going to tell me on a house that you flipped from top to bottom, you took it down to the studs, you don't know anything about this house?
Right.
No way. So you don't have to know, the whole history of it. Maybe you've only owned it for a year, but you know something about the property.
Right.
Yeah.
Unless the only time I can think of, okay, maybe you really don't know, is if you inherited a house. So it's like an estate. I think that's the only time I'm kind of like, okay, you might not know anything about this property yet. Aside from that, you should know something.
Yeah. And I think that's, one of those things, it's our job to help discover maybe some pretty obvious latent defects, because we could be charged with negligence if we don't. I mean, if we see something that we should know as a realtor, is always the question. And we don't ask any questions about it, and we don't pursue any answers there, then there's liability and there's culpability on our side. But also, when you ask those questions, you're trying to protect your seller too. Because
if I see that there's been a water leak, I'm going to ask about it. We're not just going to ignore it. I'm going to ask about it. And we actually have an obligation to disclose things that we see as well. And there's a form for it. So if we see things, we also have to disclose that there is a spot on the ceiling. We can't say, from a roof leak, but we do have to say, that's there.
Yeah.
And realistically, if it's my listing and I don't put it on and Ben goes to show my listing, he's going to point it out anyways. We're all seeing the same thing.
Right.
So no reason to try and be sneaky and hide it, because it's going to be, everything gets brought to light in a real estate transaction.
Right.
Everything.
And it's best to happen before the closing.
I know, because that's, you'll find it. Nothing is hidden.
Well, and this industry seemed to have pushed a little bit toward, and this is kind of the way I say this, is a don't ask, don't tell policy. Because of the home inspections. We are not allowed in New Mexico to send over a home inspection to a seller. If we're working with a buyer, it's the buyer's report. And we can't send that report over in entirety without the seller asking for it. So in that situation, it's kind of a don't ask, don't tell, because if that deal falls through, the seller doesn't want to know about any of the issues that may be on that home inspection report. So then you kind of have that tug back and forth between disclosure and not knowing type of thing. But let's move into like transparency when you're doing negotiations. Paul, you're big on negotiations. How transparent are you with the other realtor when you're going into a deal or negotiating, helping to negotiate a contract?
Every negotiation is different. I have a different set of facts for each negotiation, but I would say I try to feel out the other side first. Like I don't say, here's my stuff. So I'm probably not transparent at all. I'll probably say, what are your seller's biggest no-goes or, if I'm talking to another realtor, your clients, what are their must-haves? What are their, deal breakers? So then I know with my set of facts what I can do with that. I'll say, here's what I can get, here's what I need to do, and then go back to my clients and say, here's what I think we should do.
So let's advance that conversation a little bit further along. So you've had a couple rounds of back and forth counteroffer 2 and 3, and at some point you get to where you're drawing the line in the sand. Is that the point that you just say, here's the cards, this is what we have, are we going to make this work or not? And you become fully transparent with the position, or you advise your client, I should say, to be open to that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, at some point it's we do it or we don't. So at that point, you have to show your cards. So yeah, it goes from 0 to full transparency. But if we can, if we can start to whittle away at what the other side is getting or wanting, then we don't necessarily have to go to show all of our cards. So usually it doesn't have to get that way. Usually there's give and take. But yeah, if it's losing the deal, then yeah, full transparency.
Well, what are your thoughts about being transparent, like right up front? This is what we have to work with. This is what we're doing. Does that help or hurt the process?
I think it depends on the individual transaction. I don't think there's a one size fits all. I've recently had a property that, was a bit distressed, and we didn't know that going into it. And my people could see that it needed a lot of stuff. And, we made an offer based on that. And then, we kind of surmised through the process there was more going on when they didn't respond. And then it was a month for a response. And then it was a special master is responding. And, then you start realizing, okay, there's some stuff going on there. That would have been good for us to know. It didn't change what we were going to offer on it because we were still going to lowball it because the house clearly needed a lot of stuff. But it would have been nice to know a little bit more and to know from that point, they could have at least prepped themselves that they were looking at maybe a month-long negotiation as opposed to a response in 24 hours.
And I'll say in all my years of doing this, I've never seen a customer want a house as badly as their people did, because that was a rough house, right? And they waited
they're
forever
working hard for it, and they're working hard for it. And and I think that on the other side, it's going to be fantastic for them. It really is for them. They're going to put a lot of work into it. It's going to be a labor of love, but it would have been nice to have a little transparency. And in all fairness, it should have said up at the front something regarding that. Usually if it's a short sale or a foreclosure or something like that, those things are disclosed in the MLS. And then at least we know what we're getting into. At least we understand that. We didn't really know that at the beginning. And the further we got in, the more, we're figuring things out.
Well, that's a good point too, because that one was said as is, right? Mm-hmm. As is like the least transparent thing that a seller could do, because they're thinking that we don't have to disclose anything because it's as is. So then it's on the buyer to surmise, I like that word, mm-hmm. Or to do their due diligence and figure out what's going on with the house.
I think as is so silly. Because you can still object to things.
And we did. I mean, the house was as is, but obviously once we dug into it, there were some just no-goes. Yeah. There are just going to be some things that, finance-wise, you're going to have to cure or we cannot buy it. And there's just some things that, we're not going to accept. You're going to fix because you're going to fix it no matter who buys it because this is just unacceptable. So, yeah, I mean, we can say that. And I think that's a good guideline. I don't see anything wrong with saying as is. That just sets the precedent that, look, I'm selling this house and I'm not really interested in doing a lot for you. And we reflect that in the price going in what we know. But everybody still knows that once you dig in, chances are you're still going to take it as is. But, come on, if you find major things in the house, there's no gas source to the house. That's problematic,
Could be an issue.
Yeah, we were not expecting things of that nature. We were expecting it needed flooring. We were expecting it needed paint. We knew it probably needed some work on the roof. We knew that the yard needed cleanup. Those are as is items that we're expecting. We're not expecting the house needs a new tank because it's actually located under part of the house. Mm-hmm. We weren't expecting that, the house is covered in mold. We weren't expecting that, when you start talking about those things, there's some do's and don'ts. There's some things that are just non-starters. So,
and it's lose the deal or come back and renegotiate a little bit. And
right.
it's totally within the seller's right to say,
They can say no.
no, we're not
This
doing
is
anything.
as is.
Take it
That's
or leave
right.
it.
That's right.
But
Yeah.
knowing all of this extra stuff,
Right.
it's probably best to go with the people
And typically,
who want
if a buyer comes in and says, look, I purchased it knowing what I was looking at, and now there's added items and I can't do this, the seller is going to say, okay, I don't mind doing that because I know that I'm going to put it back on the market and the next guy now knows about it and is going to negotiate that. So I'm going to do it there, or I'm going to do it now. I may as well move forward now. So yeah, I mean, as is, it is kind of silly to say that. There is always more of that, but we all know what that means. We all know what that means.
Yeah, as is usually there's a lot of issues.
Yeah.
But I like going through sellers and you go through the AMF or the adverse material fact and everything is, any problems with this? No. The whole thing is fine. And then we get the objections back and it's a long list and they're not shocked. They're not going, no, there's nothing wrong with this house. They're kind of like, dang it. They found it.
They caught me.
They caught me.
Yeah.
I always smirk every time I get, no, there's no problems with the house. I go, okay, should be clean inspection report.
And when you're transparent up front and you just say, look, I've had a couple of roof leaks and the last guy told me it was ready for replacement. And I have had this line out here backing up a couple of times. I want to sell it as is. I'm willing to take, X off the house for it, whatever. That's easier for a buyer to swallow. It doesn't mean a buyer's not going to buy it. A buyer will probably still buy it if it's their house, if it's the one that they want. Or they'll say, well, why don't you go ahead and give me an allowance for it and we'll bump up the price. That way I'm paying for it or we're splitting it or, whatever that is. But you can at least know what you're negotiating from. Hiding it isn't going to help, I mean, people are going to do their due diligence. They're going to find things out. You're really not going to get away with stuff.
Yeah, and that's where I was saying, and I may differ from you on this, Paul, in the sense that we just sold a property that we did as is, right? But we didn't put that in the contract because, to your point, Aspen, it's kind of silly to have it in the contract. People can still make objections during their inspection period, but we went in with, here's a pre-inspection. The seller really, it's an estate sale. They really don't know much about other than what's in the inspection. Everyone gets to view it. We're pricing it accordingly, and then you can make your own determination, buyer. And that was a very transparent approach from a seller, in my opinion, because they provided the paperwork that they had and the reports to back it up and said, we're pricing accordingly, but we do not want to dicker around with replacing a line or fixing a leaky faucet or whatever else. So they tried to take a very transparent approach to that part of the sale. So,
well, that's a strategy.
Yeah.
You said, I've laid all these cards out so that I can play other cards later. So that's not full transparency. That's an opening offer.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I can see that. Yeah. I mean, it is part of a strategy. I'm trying to think, where they weren't transparent, because in all honesty, they were as transparent as they could be in that situation, in the sense that they don't really know any other things than what's on that report. And here's the report. Fair playing field for all potential buyers and price accordingly and let the market decide. So that's where I'm saying kind of the going into it with a transparent foot forward may help your cause. But I see what you're saying is that was a good strategy. Hey, that was my strategy. You like that?
And it took
me a couple of years to learn that.
There are cases where, I mean, maybe we should talk about the other side. There are cases where, transparency isn't necessary. I don't want really the other side to know that maybe my buyers aren't on the same page or my sellers aren't on the same page. I may not want them to know that. I don't want them to have information that they can use to their advantage against my customer.
Like they have to sell the house.
Yeah. So sometimes that works. Sometimes it's easy to just throw it out there and say, they must sell this house in 30 days. Bring me all your offers. And that's what your customer wants. And they want to do that. But in other times they're saying, we are so desperate, but we've got to have X amount out of this house. Okay, then I'm not going to, do those things.
Yeah.
It can depend.
Well, and one of the first untransparent things we do is our pre-qual letter is for the purchase price. We don't say these guys can go up to 500,000 and you're buying a 300,000 because you know that they can add it to the purchase price. So I think that right there is saying, no, we can afford this right here.
Yeah. Do you always get a new one?
Yeah.
I don't.
So if you have someone that's qualified for 700,000 and they're only making an offer for something at 650 or 600.
I mean, if it's the first offer, then I'll probably do it. But if they, like I have some investment clients, they're looking around the same price point. maybe it's $15,000 higher, but
It's right in the ballpark.
it's right in the ballpark. Yeah. Maybe not in like, this is the one house they're looking at. It's the first offer they made and all.
But I think you're right, Paul, because I think that once you give away your cards, if you say, if you bring an offer, it's say the house is, 500,000 and they've got a 600,000 pre-qualification, and you go under contract, and then later on, the buyer is saying, I would really like X, Y, and Z done because it's on this thing. How many times have we seen those sellers saying they can afford it?
Yep.
That doesn't mean they should have to pay for it, but
or
that's
proof of funds that you need the X amount, and you show I've got twice as much as that.
I'm going to tell you with proof of funds, and this is just me. I think that's a great point. When it comes to proof of funds, I always have them get a letter.
Yep.
Stating that they have enough to cover that amount. A lot of people will just take a screenshot of their bank account. If you're buying a house for $200,000, you do not need to show the other side that you have $1 million in your account. I just don't think that whether you buy the house or not, it doesn't matter what you can afford or can't afford. I just don't think anybody on the street needs to know how much money you have in your account. So I always have someone get a letter.
It also doesn't make
just
the house more valuable just because
because I can afford more. Yeah. If I can afford
pickier.
Right. If I can afford $1 million house, but I'm buying a house, if I've got $1 million, but I'm buying a $200,000 house, I'm not going to pay you $1 million for it, no matter how much money I have in the account. This is what I'm buying. Yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah, I think at some point, and also, I just don't think sellers look at them that much. They ask, are they pre-approved? Yep. I send, I attach it with the offer. We go over it together.
That's more for us.
Pre-approvals attached.
Yeah.
They're not. From what I've never had one like really scrutinizing the pre-approval letter. They're worried about the offer and if they're approved or not.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on the clientele, because I've had the opposite. I've had a lot of them. Like I'm in a deal right now. We're dickering over $1,000 because they don't have it. We don't have it. We should renegotiate this whole thing. Then they go back to, well, they were pre-approved for this. We did all of, I think at certain price points, I've noticed certain price points, they're very picky about who has the advantage.
Yeah.
So I don't like to show my clients have the advantage. I like them to be at a disadvantage, and then we can make.
Don't expect much from.
Yeah, we can make better decisions.
Yeah.
With that though, let's say you're approved for $230,000, and then you negotiate $10,000 off from the inspection, so now you're at $220,000. Just because, and then the appraisal comes back $5,000 low. And just because they're approved for more doesn't mean they have the cash to be able to cover that. So I can kind of see what you're saying, but it doesn't really give away their whole spot because we don't know what cash they have in the bank to be able to cover those funds. Or if they're getting a gift from someone for their down payment. I mean, just because someone's approved for $1 million doesn't mean they have $200,000 down. You don't know what's
sure. They could only have 5%. Yeah.
Well, exactly. But I mean, you don't want the buyers to know they're getting a gift or the sellers to know they're getting a gift either.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. Like, just because they were pre-approved for more doesn't mean they can actually pay cash for more.
Sure. That's why I think, but that's why I think in that regard, in those opening conversations, to not know that they're approved for more, that they're getting a gift, that they're doing, that they're borrowing from family or something like that.
Yeah, that should be private information.
That's all private information. So those are cards for later.
Yeah.
Where I really like the transparency on a pre-qualification is when it gives me what they've done so far and what needs to be done. I want to know, do they have to sell a house? I want to know, is this contingent upon them pulling money out of their 401k? Is there, I want to know.
Is it a down payment assistance?
Yeah. Like exactly. I want to know what those are in there. I also want to know what they've done so far, because sometimes someone will give you a pre-qualification just based off of, credit. Exactly. They filled off an application. And then others who've actually collected documentation and put them through underwriting. That's so much stronger. So especially if you're looking at getting, maybe you've got a property where you've got 3 or 4 deals and you're really breaking it down. I want as much transparency as I can. I want it to know as much about that buyer's pre-qualification, because this one's kind of still up in the air here. This one's hammered down. I mean, this is a well qualified and
through underwriting.
That's right. And it's by a lender that I trust and that I know, as opposed to, some online place did an online application. Nothing's been verified. This is a little more uncertain.
There is a difference between between a pre-qualification and a pre-approval. Just for our viewers, a pre-qualification is, hey, someone submitted an application, but nothing's been verified. And so you can claim that you make this and you only have this much in debt until they actually verify it and run it through the initial underwriting. Then you get a pre-approval, which holds a lot more weight than a pre-qualification.
That's where that transparency is so important, because then people are actually making decisions based on real information. You know, I really, really want real, clear information when it comes to stuff like that.
There's a lot of reals.
Something I think I do differently than everyone here too is with transparency. I can almost always give terms on my listings. Almost always. I like it as I'm very kind of hard in negotiating for my clients. Obviously, sometimes if it's the perfect house for them and they're going to offer full price, then that's what it is. And that's great because they want the house and they want to put their best foot forward. But sometimes we want to push a little bit more. So I like whenever clients kind of give me the opportunity to maybe release terms if it's beneficial.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Let's pivot real quick because we only have a couple more minutes. What about transparency in regard to realtors and their activity on the home or potential other offers? How can that affect a deal?
I think that's really important. I think it's important to have transparency for us as well. You know, do I have an interest in this property? Or, you know, I've got, you know, maybe I'm the listing agent and I've got 3 offers bringing to you. Did I write one of them? I think that's something you need to know.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm going to push that more than somebody else's. I mean, and not tell you. Absolutely. Yeah. So I think that kind of transparency is very important. It's very important with realtor to be, you know, let them know right up front, this is my mother that I'm writing this offer for. You know, I think transparency when it comes to us is that's a no. There's times where we can hold back with our clients.
Yeah,
but
Ben had written an offer on one of my listings, and I had a client write an offer on the listing, and I told him hey, I'm writing one too. But that was one time I was like, no terms are being shared. Everything is super.
Well, I like the way you did that too. I think you spreadsheeted it out, and the sellers didn't know who was working with who. They just saw the terms of the contract.
Yeah, they didn't see the realtor, but they did see everything else. So I did it a little bit differently in that case, just to make sure there was no biased decision.
Yeah, it's really a slippery slope.
Yeah, that's the way I do it too when I have multiple offers.
Yeah, we try to be as fair as possible, especially to our peers, because a deal will come and go, but you got to work with your peers for years, sometimes decades, and you want to maintain a good, healthy relationship with them. So I know here, our partners at the Lyons Group, we always try to play above board, and on occasion there's mishaps that happen. It's, no one's perfect, and things that we could look back in retrospect, say, I could have done that better. But by and large, I think, we certainly try to set the standard as far as being transparent with our offers and our clients in that regard. And I think that can really help to a large degree, because that builds a reputation of, hey, I know the other side is, when they say they're going to do something, they do it. And I know that I'm going to get a fair shake at this offer, even though Aspen's working with the seller and she's writing an offer. I know I'm going to get a fair shake at that. And that's great for my clients. And I can go to bat and say, hey, you know what, there's multiple offers, but I know she's going to give us a fair shake.
I think that's fair housing and ethics too. I think that really, you have to be ethical as much as you can. We're not always, you always try to be, but you're probably going to make some mishaps at some point, but you really should striving to be ethical. And I think that's whenever it counts, whenever it's the hard decision, because it'd be really easy to say, I can give terms, here's the highest, you want to go 1,000 over? It'd be really easy to do that. And I think you have to that's when it counts. That's when the ethics matters.
Yeah.
And if you're going to get into that game, then get into that game fair across the board to everybody. If your seller releases you and says, hey, play the auction, play the bid, then go for it. That's fine, but make sure it's fair for everybody that's involved in it.
Yeah, if you're going to give terms, you give terms to everybody.
Yeah.
You make sure everybody knows.
Well, great discussion, man. I just sat back and just watched that happen. That was fantastic. And
we don't really need you.
Ben didn't want to give his secrets.
That's right. I didn't want to be transparent about my secrets. Glass Joe was sitting back hoping not to break. But this was a great discussion. I do think transparency, if used right, can really help move you forward in your goals in real estate. And it's important to be able to treat people with respect and honesty and with ethical care. So great discussion. Thank you for that. If you like our content, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to our Facebook page. We have Instagram. Paul's the TikTok king here. We try to keep him from going viral all the time.
I've got the most views.
You got the most views. And thank you. Please comment on our videos and let us know if you want to see any talking points, because we love to hear some discussion there. Sign up for our newsletter. We have a fantastic newsletter. But most importantly, go to sjcbroker.com and you can schedule a consultation with any partner here at the Lyons Group, whether it's commercial or residential, or you're buying or selling. We can give you an advantage in today's market. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Den.
Thank you for listening to The Den, powered by the Lyons Group. Hit the subscribe button to keep informed on real estate happenings. If you'd like to learn more about the Lyons Group, visit sjcbroker.com. Complex markets require complex strategies. The Lyons Group can give you a true advantage in any market. Whether you're buying or selling, residential or commercial, contact us directly at sjcbroker.com. We're time-tested experts with a client-first approach, and we'll see you next time in The Den.